In a quiet room in Geneva, men in suits sat across a polished table. No cameras, no smiles, just folders, and the weight of history. Thousands of kilometers away, in the dark waters of the Persian Gulf, an aircraft carrier turns into the wind. Fighter jets begin to launch, and in the narrow Strait of Hormuz, Iranian fast attack boats swarm like shadows. Because in 2026, the United States and Iran are talking peace while preparing for war. This is not just another negotiation. This is nuclear brinkmanship. And the outcome could decide the future of the Middle East, the global economy, and the balance of power on Earth. For years, diplomacy between Washington and Tehran was frozen. Sanctions, proxy wars, assassinations, cyber attacks. The 2015 nuclear deal, once hailed as a historic breakthrough, had collapsed into the mutual distrust. But in the early 2026, something changed. Through Omani mediators, American and Iranian officials met again in Geneva. Indirect talks, same building, different rooms. Messages passed back and forth. And for the first time in years, both sides used the same words: a good start. Iran's foreign minister spoke of general agreement on guiding principles, a framework, not a deal, but enough to shake global headlines. Because when these two nations talk, the world listens. For Tehran, the objective is simple: recognition. Recognition of its right to enrich uranium. Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful. Energy, medical research, scientific progress. But enrichment is the key. Because the same process that fuels a reactor can also, if pushed far enough, produce the material for a nuclear weapon. Iran says it has red lines. No discussion of its missile program. No discussion of its regional allies. No discussion of regime structure. Nuclear only, nothing else. To Iran, this is sovereignty. To Washington, this is the problem. For the United States, this is no longer just about uranium. Washington wants a broader deal: missile limitations, regional de-escalation, proxy restraint. Because in the years since the original agreement, Iran's influence has expanded across the Middle East. From Iraq to Syria, Lebanon to Yemen, Iran is no longer isolated. It is embedded. But in the Washington's view, a nuclear deal without addressing that network is only half a solution. President Donald Trump, back in the White House, made their strategy clear: ready for a deal, but prepared for a war. Diplomacy backed by the maximum pressure. Then came the announcement that shocked global markets: a 25% tariff, not on Iran, but on any country that trades with Iran. It was economic warfare on a global scale. The message was simple: do business with Tehran and you pay the price. For Iran, this was an attempt to suffocate its economy. For the rest of the world, it was a forced choice. Between access to the American market and access to the Iranian energy, oil traders panicked. Shipping routes were recalculated. Currencies fluctuated overnight, because this was no longer a regional dispute. This was a global pressure campaign. While diplomats spoke in Geneva, satellites tracked something else. US naval deployments are increasing in the Gulf. Carrier strike groups, destroyers, missile defense systems. Iran responded in the only language it trusts: military drills, ballistic missile tests, swarm boat exercises. And then, the moment that sent shockwaves through the energy markets, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Not permanently, not even for a full day, just for hours. But that was enough. Because that narrow strip of water carries nearly 20% of the world's oil supply. 20%. For a few hours, the artery of the global economy stopped beating. Oil prices surged. Insurance rates for tankers spiked. And every major capital, from Beijing to Brussels, began emergency consultations. That was the demonstration, not a war, but a message. If we cannot sell our oil, no one will. This is what makes the US-Iran conflict unique. It is not just about two nations. It is about the world's energy lifeline. Every factory in Asia, every fuel pump in Europe, every supply chain on Earth, all of them depend in some way on the stability of the Persian Gulf. And in 2026, the stability hangs on the negotiations conducted through the intermediaries in hotel conference rooms. the global economy has become a hostage to diplomacy. In Tehran, sanctions mean inflation, medicine shortages, a currency that loses its value by the week. In the Gulf states, missile defense sirens are tested regularly. In Israel, military planners run simulations for a multi-front war. While in Washington, families watch another potential Middle Eastern crisis unfold. But for the ordinary people, this is not about uranium, not about a tariff structure. It is about survival, jobs, fuel prices, security. The ripple effects of this standoff reaches far beyond the negotiating table. Here is the real obstacle. Neither side trusts the other. Iran remembers the collapse of the previous deal. The US remembers hidden nuclear activities from the decades past. Every promise comes with suspicion. Every concession is seen as weakness. So the negotiations move forward slowly, carefully, like two rivals walking across a frozen lake, unsure if the ice will hold. Time is the most dangerous factor because while talks continue, Iran's nuclear program advances. Centrifuges spin, stockpiles grow. Knowledge cannot be bombed. Even if facilities are destroyed, the expertise remains. And that creates a shrinking window for diplomacy. Every month without a deal changes the strategic calculation for both sides. If diplomacy fails, what happens? Not an invasion, of course, not in 2026. War would begin in shadows. Airstrikes on nuclear facilities, missile barrages on regional bases, proxy attacks across multiple countries, cyber warfare targeting infrastructure, closure of Hormuz, oil to $150 per barrel or maybe higher, global recession, regional chaos, and the ever-present fear, escalation beyond control. But what if diplomacy succeeds? What happens then? Sanctions relief for Iran, limits on enrichment, international inspections, stabilized oil markets, a temporary reduction in regional tensions. Not peace, but a pause. Because this conflict is not just about nuclear physics. It is about ideology, power, and security architecture in the Middle East. A deal would delay the crisis. It would not erase it. So here we are. Geneva, Persian Gulf, Washington, Tehran. 4 locations, one outcome that could reshape the world. This is nuclear brinkmanship in its purest form. Negotiations conducted under the shadow of warships. Economic warfare threatening global trade. A choke point that can paralyze the planet. And 2 nations that see compromise as risk and confrontation as survival. The question is no longer whether they can reach a deal. The question is who blinks first. Because in this standoff, the cost of miscalculation is not measured in politics. It is measured in global shockwaves and possibly in nuclear history. The talks continue, the fleets remain in position, and the world watches. Because the next move could decide everything. This story is far from over.